So, can you think of something to tap on?
That's the problem. Do you have to know about it or not? You want it because you want exact words.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well, I might as well continue my story. Yes. So you want me to tell you about it? I feel very let down by my principal, who ended up, after 20 years being in the leadership team, said I no longer had a leadership position.
Okay, so stop there. Where do you feel that in your body straight away when she said you no longer...
He did.
When he said you no longer have a position...
In the gut, in the stomach.
In the leadership committee?
Mm-hmm.
In the gut, in the stomach, what is it out of 10?
Actually I can feel the sadness now,
Mm-hmm.
maybe because I'm tired and I'm feeling very sad, like I want to cry, and I think the gut is more a fear reaction about that.
So where's the sadness?
More up in the head and neck and chest.
And what is that out of 10?
Well, that was a 9, I think, when I initially felt that sadness coming up.
Okay. Even though I've got this sadness in my neck and chest,
Even though I've got this sadness in my neck and chest,
when I remember hearing
the
sound of my boss's voice,
the sound of my boss's voice,
when he said,
I'm
no longer a member of the leadership team committee, and it brings up all of that emotion, I accept myself and the way my body's holding on to it,
I accept myself and the way my body is holding on to it.
and I choose to process and release it.
And I choose to process and release it.
All this, even though I've got all this sadness
Even though I've got all this sadness
in my head and my chest,
in my head and my chest,
when I remember my boss saying, you no longer have a position in the leadership committee,
you no longer have a position in the leadership team,
I accept myself and my body's reactions,
and my body's reactions,
and I choose to process and release them.
and I choose to process and release it.
Even though I've still got all this sadness in my head and my chest,
Even though I've got all this sadness in my head and my chest,
when my boss said,
you
no longer have a position in the leadership team,
when he said, I no longer have a position in the leadership team,
I accept myself
and
my body's responses,
my body's responses,
and I choose to process and release them.
and I choose to process and release them.
I first had a feeling in the gut,
I first had a feeling in the gut,
but then it turned to sadness.
This
Sadness in my head and my chest.
sadness in my head and my chest.
I just wanted to cry.
I just wanted to cry.
When I remembered the sound of his voice.
When
he said, you no longer have a place in the
leadership
team.
When I no longer had a place in the leadership team.
The look on his face. The shock in my body.
The
sadness in my face and my chest. Head and my chest.
The sadness in my head and my chest.
I thank my body for holding on to it. To protect me. But it no longer serves me. And I choose to process and release it. Processing and releasing all that sadness. When I remember the look on his face. When I remember the sound of his voice. When he said, I no longer have a place on the leadership team.
When he said, I no longer have a place on the leadership team.
Releasing the shock and the sadness. Out of my head and my chest.
And
out of my gut.
All the way back to the time he said that to me.
Thanking my body for holding on to it. But it no longer serves me. And I choose to release it. Even when I remember him.
even when I remember him,
and the look on his face,
and the look on his face,
and the sound of his voice,
and the sound of his voice,
when he said,
"You
you no longer have a place on the leadership team."
no longer have a place on." Oh, he said, I am not renewing your contract. He said, "I'm not renewing your contract."
I can still remember those words.
I can still remember those words.
I'm
He's not rolling over my contract.
When he said, "I'm not rolling over your contract."
When he said, "I'm not rolling over your contract."
Everything my body remembers.
Everything my body remembers.
When he said that.
When he said that.
The shock
The shock
in my gut.
in my gut.
The sadness
The sadness
in my head and my chest.
in my head and in my chest.
It's time to process and release it now.
It's time to process it and release it now.
So see how the emotion came up and then came down?
Yeah, that was pretty good.
It didn't take long, just on that little bit.
And-
But see
and-
how when I said committee instead of team, it didn't land, and you said no team, and then it became even more specific. And you said, actually, he said this. What he meant though was that I was no longer on the team, but once we got rid of the emotion from that, he said actually what he said was this.
I remembered. Yeah. Oh, that was good. I didn't know I was still that emotionally charged about it. So I hope it's released, or maybe there's other aspects that need to be tapped on. For that.
Yes, but
Thank you, Jen.
basically it was just a very short video to show how you use the client's exact words. So you started off with it in the gut, but then you said actually no, it's sadness, and there was all the emotion around sadness. So I was working mostly on the sadness in the head and chest. However, I threw in a little bit about the gut, and I intuited that it was a shock to you, and it seemed to land on you that it was a shock as well. So releasing the shock
You intuited
and the
that.
sadness. Yeah, because if someone said that to me out of nowhere, I would have been shocked at it as well as sad.
Okay. Thank
Wow.
you. Yep.
Well done.